I'm Tracy McKibben. I'm the chair of the Finance and Risk Committee of the Authority and the New York State Canal Corporation. I'd like to welcome my committee members who are both here in person as well as virtual, Chairman John Comel, Michael Balboni, and Judge Eugene Nicandri. Excused today is Anthony Pacenti, Bia Gonzalez, and Dennis Trainer. Welcome to our NYPA staff and Canal Corporation staff who's joining us here in person. This meeting has been duly noticed as required by the open meetings law, and I now call this meeting to order. Everyone's had a chance to look at the agenda and to see if there are any suggested or recommended amendments. If there are any, please let me know. If there are none, I ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'd like to amend the agenda to move one item from the consent agenda into the formal agenda, which is the approval of the, appropriation dividend contribution to the state for the 17.5 million. So I prefer that be, handled with a formal motion rather than in consent.
Great. So with that amendment to bring that issue onto the agenda, I'll ask for a motion to adopt the amended agenda for today.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I heard a second in there. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The agenda is now adopted. The next portion of this meeting will be held in executive session. I'll ask for a motion to conduct an executive session to discuss the financial and credit history of a particular corporation pursuant to Section 105 of the Public Officers Law. If I could get a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Do I hear a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We will be back with you shortly. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I'll ask for a motion to resume the meeting in open session.
So moved. Second.
I'm going to moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. No votes were taken during the executive session. Everyone's had a chance to look at the contractors list for conflicts of interest. And everyone was polled prior to this meeting, and any conflicts have been submitted. We'll now move quickly into a discussion under our financial operations, and up first actually is Adrian Lotto Walker, VP and Chief Risk and Resilience Officer, who'll present an update. Right, Adrian, you up first?
Yes, good afternoon, Trustee McKibben, Chairman Comel, and to all of my trustees and my NYPA and Canal colleagues. At the January Finance and Risk Committee meeting, the board requested an update on the counterparties used to support the hedging program. So we're here today, Earl Fingali and myself, to respond to that request and provide a holistic overview of the credit exposure at the Power Authority. The risk management group recognizes credit risk from counterparties that commercial operations and Treasury utilize when they transact energy, capacity, and aluminum products positions. So ultimately, we'd like to provide confidence to the Finance and Risk Committee that coordinated activities are ongoing and remain ongoing, both between the CFO's office, the Chief Operations Officer, and risk management. So with that, I'll turn to my colleague Earl, who provide an overview on the credit exposures. Earl?
Okay, good afternoon, Chair, trustees, and NYPA Executive Management. I'm Earl Fingali, Senior Director of Market Commodities and Risk. And as Adrian mentioned, I'm here to provide an overview of the activities that the risk management group provides for the organization in terms of how credit risk is managed. Specifically, I'll also go into detail in terms of the request from the committee regarding the counterparties that we use in our hedge program. As you can see on the slide, credit risk as defined is the possibility or the loss of failure from when we do not receive payments from our contractual obligations. In terms of our business lines, these come from our commodity hedging programs, our clean energy solutions portfolio, where we have significant financing for our customers' projects, and also short-term receivables when we bill our customers for their economic development programs, for their energy use. To govern all this, an enterprise credit risk committee was established late last year that provides oversight, control, and guidance, because we acknowledge that in order to ensure that the impact of our cash flows is lessened, or the probability of impacting our cash flows is mitigated, this Enterprise Credit Risk Committee provides guidance for the organization in terms of what the risk team monitors and when we provide guidance to the organization. If I could please ask the slide to be flipped. So in the hedging program that we talk about, when you enter transactions with counterparties, you're actually mitigating your energy price risk. But as an outcome of that, you enter into a contractual obligation with counterparties. So essentially, you're establishing and mitigating your risk, transferring it to another counterparty. NYPA monitors and ensures that those counterparties are viable and are strong financially to ensure that they will be around to meet their obligation in terms of if these hedges were to settle. When we onboard these counterparties, we take a look at their credit ratings to make sure that it is of a quality rated by S&P and Moody's. We also look at news events, taking a look at adverse impacts of the industry. We take a look at upgrades or downgrades in outlook. And when we enter into, I guess, arrangements with these counterparties, we're using industry standard documents called ISDAs, so that it's a starting point and that both parties have certain terms already pre-negotiated. Lastly, we also try and leverage the authority's strong credit rating in that we recognize the work that Adam's team has been doing in terms of preserving that. So here on the diagram, you can see in terms of the unsecured credit lines that's extended to NYPA and what we extend to NYPA, it's asymmetrical in that we're I would say pretty conservative in extending credit. We make sure that our exposures are protected while strong credit rating displays, you can see on the screen, kind of a higher amount in terms of what they're allowing us to do business with. There are some notes on some of those counterparties where you can see we're negotiating to higher amounts to enable us to continue to do business without having to post collateral.
And I guess the evaluation of these counterparties is done at that risk committee, the credit risk committee, right? You approve this list that we see before us. It's that committee who approved this?
So we had a portfolio prior, so then going forward, any counterparties that are to be onboarded, depending on the quality, the intent is to bring it up to the committee for approval and for review.
So everyone's grandfathered in, all those who were there. And as you look at those who are here and you try to evaluate, I get your point about they're extending credit to us more than we are to them. So it's imbalanced in a positive way that way. But when you look at companies that, we've had a discussion about the credit rating, how confident are you if there is a company that's doesn't have a credit rating, will even be able to extend that to you? They're not here? Okay.
We need to work out the kinks on this system.
Okay.
So could I flip to the next page, please, Carly? And Chair, to answer your question about protecting, about how sure we are about the counterparties, the quality of it. What we do as part of these agreements, we have daily collateral arrangements, and that any exposure that we have, we monitor and we negotiate with the counterparties. We work with the Treasury team in terms of protecting those collateral, or we're collateralizing those amounts that are of exposure. So every day, if there's an exposure to NYPA or an exposure to the counterparty, we transfer funds. So just as a quick example, if let's say our commercial ops team had engaged in a sale of power at $50 and the market were to decline to 40, that $10 differential, we would ask for them to transfer to us and we would hold on to that. So in case a default event happens or anything happens to the counterparty, we would be holding that collateralized amount. So this is a way, as part of the industry standard contracts, that we are protecting our interests in these positions.
And I guess my question is getting to how you evaluate their ability, right, to provide that 10 million. And it's one of the one of the considerations is their credit rating. And then the other one was, I guess, you look at how active they are in the market. So when you have someone who doesn't have a credit rating, you're really relying on how active that counterparty is in
Yep,
the market, right?
And also with those counterparties, we also look for adverse news events, and
Right.
we also look at their financials periodically. And we also look at, we impose internal limits that are lower to make sure that our exposure to those are limited.
Okay.
And my only cautionary, you've heard of guys have heard from me before, since this is a risk mitigation strategy, I hate to see us take on incremental risk with non-investment grade counterparties in an effort to minimize, the risk that's otherwise inherent in our balance sheet. So we're taking on risk to minimize risk. So I realize you're trying to mitigate risk with the counterparty so you can mitigate the risk on the balance sheet. There's complexities there that seem unnecessary, but if you're saying that's for ease of execution on any given day or circumstance, you can backfill us. But that's my continued caution, that we don't have a make work project here. That ultimately ends up, we're in a similar position than if we hadn't executed on the transaction to begin with. But acknowledge it's an ignorant bias perspective. Okay. So I appreciate that more than half are rated above A-. That's code for we've got exposure that we haven't summarized in the bullet point with the 49%, that are rated below. So I'm concerned that we've got unnecessary risk, however low, in the 49%. But you can come back to us with that.
Okay, and I think maybe just to finish the presentation, in terms of managing those, the remaining 49% that you mentioned, we do have guidance, and we're developing further guidance, as you mentioned, to minimize activities with those and to prevent concentration with those counterparties as well.
Right.
So
Right.
we'll follow up with that.
Great, thanks, Earl.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll assume the majority of our activity is with the more than half that are investment grade or appropriate highly rated. Okay. So more than half of our activity is with the more than half that are, okay.
Right, Adam?
Yep. You want me to get up, or I can do it from here? Or?
Probably there because they
Sure,
were having
probably.
trouble hearing. So.
Okay.
You look taller over there too, so just more commanding presence.
Okay, good afternoon, trustees, fellow colleagues at Ninth and members of the public in attendance. Just giving an update on the financial results for the first 2 months of the year. We're in the process of also putting together our out-year forecast, which we'll update at the full board meeting, and in the process of finalizing right now. If you want to go to the next page. I would say that we're off to a swimmingly well start for the year.
I just don't know if we can extrapolate that times 6.
Right, you really can't, but.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm surprised you would say that.
Right. No, it's a lot of it had to do with the fact that obviously energy prices are higher in general, but we also had a colder than normal January. And so, we've done quite well on our market-based sales and our merchant margin. Still project that to do well over the course of the year. Transmission margin slightly above, and non-utility a little bit below. And operating expenses are slightly higher. I would just, caution that to say that some of that is based on the fact that, again, because energy prices are higher, it shows as an expense, but it has to do with, and we'll break it out in the full board meeting, money that we have to set aside for what we call the monetized funds. So actually, if the prices that we're getting in the market are over a tariff rate, we put that money aside and we pay it back to those funds as a rebate for offset their rates. So it's a benefit to those customers in Western New York and Northern New York. So there's about $10 million there. So overall expenses are tracking.
So what's
The
the,
plan.
I mean, in terms of the bump, how much is rate, how much is volume? You said it's, rate as well as.
Rate, it's over the tariff rate.
So, I mean, the bulk of this is on rate, not on volume. You said colder than anticipated, colder than planned, so I call that volume. But pure rate, I mean, is it 80-20, 90-10? I mean, why, how is it that much higher than we would have anticipated or forecast or planned?
So generation is doing well. It's not behind. Last year, we were down a little bit by 6% overall. This year, we're doing well, but it's really mostly rates related.
Spark spreads.
Yeah, just the spreads overall, both upstate, downstate.
Gas prices.
So we tend.
It's moved that much from the time we
Yes.
fixed the plan.
Yes,
Okay.
we tend to overall, right, if you take all the different rates that we have and combine them, there's a very high correlation to the price of natural gas. And if you look what's going on with the price of natural gas, it's gone up.
Yeah.
And, you saw oil going up over almost $130 a barrel, sort of hovering in that $100 range. So overall, and gas prices generally are higher. So yeah, we're just tracking to that. We're negative on our hedges, of course, because we are trying to protect the downside. So we're not seeing it 1-to-1 for the increase because we're trying to protect the downside. And there's been a lot of volatility in the market. So, but overall, we're tracking ahead of plan. So it's all good from that end.
For the board meeting, maybe you could give us a quick little analysis in terms of comparing where, spot
We do
rates
that.
or other rates were at when we did the plan, where they are here trending. I mean, just something that
Exactly.
it would show that would be helpful,
Yep.
just in terms of a mini analysis. Okay.
Yep, we have all that data to break down to you.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this?
But nice miss. If you're going to miss, nice miss.
Well, I mean, we see it sort of coming
We'll
back.
take those misses.
We see it
any day.
reverting back to the norm by.
Just know I
about a year, but-
multiplied it by 6 when I first
Nah,
saw it,
it's
so
not-
I thought we were going to have another solid year. So well done.
No, we'll have a solid year. I just don't think it's going to be exactly at that multiple.
Sandbagger Barsky,
Right.
all right? You've stepped right into it. Okay.
Managing expectations.
All right.
Very wise. Very wise.
Bagger Adam, you've got it. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work.
I think next on the agenda is Christine. Oh, there you go.
And I'll come up here.
All right.
Also with you.
Great.
Good afternoon. Oh darn, I forgot my glasses.
Well, while you're doing that, I do have I need to make a note that there were no votes that were necessary, both for the update from our, on our credit risk discussion as well as Adam's
Right.
report.
But this one will.
Okay, good afternoon. Members of the Finance and Risk Committee, I'm here today to request your support for a new $150 million sublimit under our existing hybrid facility, which is currently a commercial paper backstop facility. The LCs are requested as an alternative to cash postings, which, in line with the presentation that Earl and Adrian just made, we are doing with NYPA's counterparties. At present, we have about 130 to 150 million of cash posted pursuant to our hedging activities. We recently negotiated 110 million of incremental counterparty lines with our banks, and they're presently being documented. We would like to also have LCs as an option to post as collateral and move cash when these lines are exceeded. In terms of some history on the backstop facilities, we have $950 million of facilities, 700 million of which are just plain vanilla backstop facilities. The $250 million facility was put in place as part of our plan of finance in 2020, and it's a hybrid facility in that it's not only a commercial paper backstop facility, but it also provides for revolving loans on an as-needed basis on a LIBOR basis. The pricing when we first put the facility in place was 175 basis points over LIBOR and had a 75 basis point commitment fee. With the renewal in 2021, that dropped to an average, because there's a differential between taxable and tax exempt, of 80 basis points and 27.5 bips commitment fee. And then this year we got a further 10% improvement with the renewal that's coming up in April. will see 65 basis points over SOFR now, because we're transitioning to SOFR instead of LIBOR. For 65 basis points for tax exempt and 80 for taxable. The LCs will be tight of the cash pricing at 75 basis points per annum. And with that, I would ask for your support for the amendment and ask if there are any additional questions.
Any questions?
I'm happy to move it.
All right, with that motion, can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have a discussion. Adam, you're gonna, on the release of funds to support the canal.
Yes, good afternoon again. Just going to request from the trustees the approval of the release of funds in support of the Canal Corporation. This is the quarterly release for Q2, $21.3 million, same as the last quarter. And as of today, we continue to track towards budget. So this amount does not need to be increased at this time. If there's any other questions on that, I ask for make a recommendation to see if we can have this approved.
Great. As Adam said, this is our quarterly release. Any questions? Those in the,
I got two conflicting questions. One,
okay.
to the extent we're looking at canals as, a commingled asset, and as opposed to being operated separately, is there a way to avoid? So we need to have this continuing separate authorization. Okay.
Yes, this is because of the
Separate.
the state pledge really on
Okay.
our bonds.
So given that, is there anything out of the ordinary that we've experienced or
No.
see or foresee? It's running as anticipated, as expected.
Yes.
Okay, so moved.
I could get a second?
Second.
Moved and excuse me, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Adam.
When
You've
do
got
the
one more.
when do the canals open?
May 21st, I think, or
Oh,
20th,
Joe.
right?
I said on behalf of the boaters. I'm not a boater, but I just want to
Yeah.
represent all
Looper.
constituents. So, okay,
Adam, I think you have one other item that
Yes.
you want to, on the voluntary contribution to the
Right, we're
state.
moving it up. So we're requesting the Board of Trustees approval to make a voluntary contribution of $17.5 million to the state. This was approved in the state budget of last year, which was the 2021 or 21-22 budget, which ends, that fiscal year ends at the end of March. The state has requested, they put into their budget and approved $20 million, and in discussions with them, we are paying only 17.5. Asking for approval to make that release and make that payment. And I guess what I would say is, in terms of what we're talking with the state about, is to continue to move that number down and hopefully to zero with a lot of speed in the near future. And this is one item not to be looked at just in isolation, but has to be looked at all the different things that we do back and forth with the state in terms of other things that they've picked up for us, or other things we're in discussions with them to help us offset other costs. So this is just one item not to be taken just purely in isolation, but I know that it represents, an issue that we've discussed in the past, that it is our goal and the board's goal to, and direction to me, is to continue the dialogue with the state to ensure that this number continues to go down in this direction, and hopefully goes to a zero in the not too distant future. In order to approve this request, trustees need to find that it's deemed feasible and advisable, and it meets with all of our There's a board resolution that it has to meet with that after the payment of this and other releases, that we still maintain our 2.0 debt service coverage ratio, which we do. And that, and also make sure that it's important to note that this money must go into state energy related projects. So to help support the state in their energy goals and their energy programs, other than the ones that we're currently doing with them, has to be consistent with our statutory mission for the authority. So that is a requirement of these funds when you make that, approve that transfer. So any questions on this?
So let me just recap for, us old schoolers. So one, this is payment of amounts that were accrued in our financials over the course of calendar 21. So we're just settling up on an accrual that we've already had recorded. Two, as you've assured us over time and again today, this is a very different dynamic, new order, new sheriff in town, if you will, versus those of us who are a bit jaded by the prior long arm, one-way street, grab and go approach that we were a victim of or a participant in. Here, you're saying good, healthy dynamic, and we're in this together, and you're comfortable and confident that this serves the collective interests of the state without harming us, rating agency included. That frankly,
That's
that was
correct.
always one black cloud that hung over us with the rating agency, that they were concerned we'd be unduly impaired. No impairment here, no risk, no downside, and part of a good quid pro quo dynamic with your counterparts in Albany.
Yes, absolutely. And I think
Okay.
we do have those conversations with the rating agencies. They do understand where this is going in those conversations, so we keep them informed about it. And again, there are other things that are not part of this that are, as I call it, the puts and takes, where in totality, it's positive for NIPA in the general scheme of things. So in light of the 17.5, the other things I believe are more beneficial to us in the long run and for NIPA. So I believe it's like I said, in the overall scheme of things, it's moving in the right direction. And again, we want to see this go to zero over time.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Again, the management has recommended that this is feasible and advisable. So, and since we've taken it out of the consent agenda, I'll need a motion to approve this contribution.
Before
I'm
you
happy
do
to
that,
move it to ensure we
With
have
the-
further discussion.
Right.
No.
Sorry, go ahead, Judge, you had a comment?
yeah, no, I've been on the board long enough to know or to see, the transfer of the canals to the Power Authority for operational purposes. My understanding at the time was there was about a $70 to $90 million hole that needed to be filled, which has turned out to be over the 4 or 5 years Power Authority has been running canals, about $130 million hole. So I have a deep concern about with that reality, continuing to make contributions to the state general fund, even if they are tied to specific mission stated objectives. I understand that the state is paying back the loan made from the Power Authority during the financial crisis of a while ago, and that they're making good progress on that, and they've been true to their word on doing that. But we have a lot of things in the pipeline here at the Power Authority, and anything you've got going, there's always contingencies. And my concern is about $17 to $20 million going out the door when they may become necessary for our purposes during the course of a particular period of time. I understand, Adam, that you've looked at all the metrics and we're still within our guide rails, and that's encouraging, but I have an ongoing concern about these continued payments going forward. And so I'm just putting that on the record that it is a concern for me, and I haven't forgotten about it.
And we appreciate that concern. It's shared by the full board, and as Adam in his dialogue with the state, again, has gotten indications that we expect this ultimately to go to zero. And so trust me, your concerns are shared across the board. And so we look forward to continuing the dialogue with the state on that. Thank you. So
Great.
we have a motion. I will take that as a second with the understanding of your voice concern. All in favor of approving this voluntary contribution, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion carried. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
We'll now turn the discussion to our utility operations. I think, Adrian, you're up to talk about supply chain and inflation risk. Is that right? Yep.
Yes, good afternoon. So this once again is a follow-up to the board meeting, the presentation from January, the Finance and Risk Committee, wherein the board requested an update and an understanding about how supply chain constraints and inflation is impacting the New York Power Authority. So I'm here today with John Canal, who has joined via Teams, Scott Tedeman and Trish Lombardi, who will also be coming up to not only describe what those external forces are, but then the impact to the authority. So I'll take the market forces, then I'll turn it over to John to take the mitigation strategies and update you on that. We'll then turn it over to Trish to understand the actual impact to NYPA projects. And then finally, Scott will discuss both inflation risk as well as the impact that we're seeing, if any, to the customers. Next slide, please. Not surprisingly, you can tell from the slide here that historic prices in steel are rising, and unfortunately, it looks as though that's going to continue to happen at least midway through 2022. That's according to the American metal markets. Similarly, we are seeing higher prices in aluminum, but John will describe a little bit some of our mitigations that we have in place for that as well. And likewise in labor, particularly craft labor, so line people, we're unfortunately seeing continued workforce constraints in tightening labor markets, which obviously impacts our projects in terms of being able to procure and obtain resources in order to build those projects. Last but not least, transportation and logistics. The global supply market has certainly been impacted, and transocean delivery, including shipment costs, have risen significantly over the past year. And unfortunately, again, we're not anticipating, God bless you, any relief for the remainder of the year. So much of this is obviously reported in open source, and the external impacts and the external market forces are certainly impacting the Power Authority. But with that, why don't I turn it over to the screen to John Canal, who will talk about some of the mitigations. John?
Thank you, Adrian. Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. As Adrian indicated, multiple market forces are stressing our supply chain. Supply chain risks are widening and deepening across most industries. This can be attributed to the COVID-19 shutdown in the last 2+ years, the slow reopening and restarting of projects, and disruptions in craft workforce. This has led to capacity constraints, extended lead times, increases in materials, labor, and transportation costs, and other challenges. Now, the current Ukraine-Russia conflict has complicated this issue even more. Specific to the utility industry and NYPA, there are several challenges that we have been closely monitoring. We have developed and implemented the corresponding mitigating strategies and actions shown on the slide. The first set of challenges we are keeping a close eye on are the cost increases in material, commodities, and transportation, and labor constraints. Our mitigation strategy and ultimately our success are hinged upon effective monitoring of the market and timely production release actions. In the last 18 months, we have intensified the monitoring of the material commodities market. We are working closely with our supply chain consultants and receiving regular market intelligence, which then feed into the strategies and actions. And we are closely working with our suppliers of major materials and equipment to gain further insights based on their experience and expertise, leveraging their resources, which are in most cases closer to the market than we are. The next group of challenges pertain to identifying adequate suppliers and ensuring supply chain capacity. We are continuously conducting risk assessments of our key suppliers to ensure adequate capacity and to ensure their lead times are in line with our needs. We attempt to identify and qualify suppliers with an interest in domestic operation and, where possible, New York State-based companies. We are leveraging the current portfolio of large projects in our competitive bidding process to identify and bring on board new suppliers with the intent to create long-term relationships with strategic suppliers. We are also adopting new contract strategies and are enhancing existing strategies by putting in place long-term fixed price contracts and our contracts with appropriate escalation models for material and labor costs based on industry indices. We are enhancing our contract terms and conditions to ensure the appropriate retention language and liquidated damage clauses are included. And we are conducting monthly performance reviews with key suppliers, increasing our expediting and monitoring services by deploying on-site surveillance resources where necessary. The last set of challenges we would like to discuss revolves around our global supply chain. Many of our suppliers' operations in manufacturing and services have shifted globally, which has implications on the quality, delivery, and costs. Unfortunately, there are currently not many domestic suppliers that can meet our needs when it comes to the purchase of high voltage equipment. In the global market, it really does not make much economic sense in most cases to ship US steel, even if available, overseas for use by non-domestic manufacturers. In these cases, where non-US steel is used, we have to request and have the board approve a US steel waiver. However, when we have options, we ensure each supplier provides alternate US pricing so that we can evaluate the economic impact. We will do this even more diligently going forward. As you are aware, in 2020 and 2021, several steel waivers were approved by the board relating to next-gen Niagara wicket gates and shafts, Niagara auto transformers, transit e-bus overhead structural steel, and East Garden City transformers and reactors. The values of these contracts were approximately $85 million, and the US steel waiver cost avoidance was nearly $26 million. So with that, I will now turn it over to Trish Lombardi. Thank you.
So before you start, Trish, John, one question I have is you look at your suppliers and how our mitigation strategy, do we engage in, are you starting to reevaluate how you contract out and having sort of reserve contractors on board and also building up inventory? Because our projects, I mean, they're long lead time projects. And so are we changing how we look at our inventory for what we need to finish our projects, or have you made any adjustments there to? Because the supply chain issue is going to go on for quite some time, I imagine.
Yes, I think you're right. I think
Right,
the best option here is defense in depth. So we've made sure that where it's possible, we've contracted with multiple suppliers, making sure that we have backup suppliers in case one should fall down or not be able to provide or whatever the situation may be. We do have, I think, a good suite of suppliers in different areas, and we're looking to build on that even more going forward.
All right, thank you. All right, Trish.
Sure. Thanks. Good afternoon. As John discussed, we continue to track commodity pricing very closely. And most of our major equipment, aluminum, copper, and steel are the key materials. So although the content varies depending on the equipment we're talking about, the commodities can attribute up to 50% of the total cost of that equipment. So it's really critical, as John said, as Adrian said, and you'll hear from Scott as well, that we continue to look at these commodities very closely. So in the first 5 rows in the table on the slide, you can see a cost comparison of specific equipment we bought in 2019 and subsequently pricing for the same equipment we bought in 2021. So you can see that we've seen 20 to 30% increases in several major equipment categories. The last 2 rows show 2 of the specific commodity prices that we've been tracking very closely. So between 2020 and 2021, we've noticed 2 extremes. In 2020, prices dropped considerably, about 50%, mainly due to COVID. However, in 2021, prices rebounded and to date remain very high, up to historical high levels, more than doubling the pre-COVID pricing in some cases. So correspondingly, the cost for equipment mainly used in utility operations is around 25% higher than pre-pandemic prices. But while not on the slide, it's important to note that we're affected by many commodities: epoxy resin, wood pulp, timber, things that may be not as obvious as the 3 we're focusing on today. But all of these too have seen drastic increases in pricing and again, challenges in sourcing.
Any idea like what the pre-pandemic, what the average increase was? Like because you've got 2 years combined, 2020 and 21, but the average increase was it 5%, 10% as you look at?
So I think for context, when we had awarded, and that's the example I'm going to go through on,
Okay.
but just for context to answer your question, when we sourced steel poles for SmartPath in 2019, when we awarded that contract, which was really pre-pandemic, we had estimated like a straight 15% increase over the life of the contract, which was about 4 years, the plan.
Okay, all right.
So just looking at what we had seen
About
historically, about 5%, right? A little up, a little down, but that's what we had estimated, a straight 15% across the life of the contract.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a quick question? So we haven't had to deal with a military conflict of this size in 30 years. And we don't know where this is going to go, and could be more regional impacts. To what extent are we exposed to a force majeure type of contract enforcement, where basically suppliers sit there and say, we can't supply pursuant to the contract requirements because we can't either transport or obtain the deliverables for a particular contract?
Yeah, so I think that certainly the conflict has affected, a lot of folks, but we've got intelligence that indicates that 31 of our suppliers do have some sort of Russian connection, whether it's physical presence, monetarily, or whatever. We've reached
31
out.
out of how many, John? 31 out of
31.
how many?
I think there was like 100
Okay.
There was 187 companies identified with connection to Russia. We contract with 31 of them. But when the conflict first occurred, we got input from various secure sources, and we reached out to our various suppliers to ask those questions. Pretty much none of them supplying major services and equipment came back and said that there was going to be an impact to the authority. The only impact that we see right now is in the SF6 gas industry. A lot of the gas that we procure from, a very large reputable gas supplier was procured from Russia. We have since worked with that supplier to shift the purchases of gas from Russia to other sources, like, fortunately it's China, but in other sources in Europe. So we have secured adequate sources. The only issue is pricing will go up. We're seeing it from approximately $6.50 a pound. It will raise to almost $12 a pound. So there is some impact, but we've been very proactive in reaching out to our supply base just to make sure. And we're also not just relying on them, not getting back to us. We're going to make sure that we proactively ask them what their long-term plans are. Even if not supplying products to the authority directly.
So this morning it was, there are news reports that indicate that China is either has or about to offer military assistance to China and the evasion of sanctions, which raises the specter of sanctions against China. So not only supply chain issues, but also compliance issues with sanction requirements. How does that, are you going to go back to your team and ask them to look at that as well?
Yes, definitely, that will be the next thing. And we need to get some clarity from, from the chamber with regard to the ban of doing business with Russia, just to make sure that we cover all the bases. But that is in the long-term plan for sure.
Thank you.
Let's not be doing business with Russia right now.
No, we have no direct connections or contracts with Russia for sure, yes.
I think Michael's point is, we have to
And
assume
sign it to
things
that
will
list.
escalate. We have to assume things are going to get worse. So spot analysis, we're looking for trend analysis and how do we pivot? How do we, ensure we're appropriately nimble and are anticipatory in terms of what's coming. So.
So now
Understood.
just trustee Balboni to the force majeure question. So while maybe we haven't been exposed to this specific, there's been unrest in the Middle East before. There was Fukushima in Japan, nuclear. We were affected by all those things and the contracts to protect us from force majeure. So we have seen this before. But again, at the risk of being repetitive, this is where that close relationship with the supplier is very important, because we work together to see what we can do. Can we pivot? Are there alternatives? This is really where it matters that we're very close to the supply base. So maybe we're not exposed to this specifically, but we've been privy to quite a number of force majeures in the past that we've successfully, one way or another, right, worked through.
Thank you.
So now with cost comes time. So I'll speak just now a little bit about lead time impacts. So what we've seen in the last year and what we expect to see in the next year plus in sourcing major equipment. So due to the COVID-19 shutdown, we've seen lead times go up by an average of 30% for major equipment categories. And in addition, the RFP response time has also gone up 2 to 3 weeks. So although the demand for power project was relatively flat or stable prior and during COVID, the capacity and reliability of the supply chain, on the other hand, has been significantly reduced. So some of the key drivers that we've seen, 10 to 15% increase in absenteeism due to COVID, whether direct to employees or family members, 25 to 30% workforce reduction on a factory floor office setting to help maintain social distancing, significant instability and increase in transportation lead time, both overseas and domestic, due to equipment availability of vessels, trucks, congestion at ports, delays in customs clearances. And lastly, just fluctuation in availability of materials and components for things manufactured outside the US, which was really affected by, depending which country we're looking at, where they were hitting their spikes of COVID. Next slide, please. Lastly, for me here, before I turn it over to Scott, wanted to give a specific example just to really walk you through. So this, again, back to the steel poles source for SmartPath. So in general, when we do bid evaluations, we use our own market assessments with intelligence from bidders to really assess the risk and derive what contingency funds may be potentially required for that contract. In 2019, NYPA awarded a contract to Sabre for steel poles for SmartPath in the amount of $79 million. So based on the commodity costs and forecasted escalation at the time, an additional $3.5 million in contingency was requested for managing material transportation. Yeah, sure, okay.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to time.
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
I
fair enough,
appreciate
fair
the depth of this, but I think
Sure.
this needs to be an
So,
evolving.
It's a meaty topic, this one.
Evolving,
So
ongoing,
I'll
and
speed up to the end. So I think
Yeah.
the short story here is that for this particular case, very successful. We had originally forecasted escalation for steel back in 2019 at $3.5 million, but successfully working with the supplier, pulling in releases when prices were really low. We've been able to save $2 million on the escalation front, and the projected escalation for that contract is $1.5 million.
can we just
So-
jump to the big picture end without any slides? Just tell us what the outcome is here. Are we exposed? We think we're managing our exposure? Maybe just jump to the end for the moment, Scott, or whomever.
Yeah, no, I'll jump.
Tie it together in 2 minutes for us.
2 minutes or less. Okay. Basically, we've looked at the financial exposure for increases of inflation. We did a bunch of different scenarios. We put together some numbers that you can look at later that are based on a 6% inflation estimate. Basically, we're looking at a push in terms of NYPA's P&L goes. And that's based on the way that we recover our costs through
Because we can push it
customers.
through to the customer.
Exactly.
Is that the good news or the bad news?
No, you know, it's good.
It's good and
It's
bad,
short-
usually.
it's
It's
short-
good ones are customer,
Good for us,
you know,
bad for
pain
them.
That's what
threshold.
I mean.
But it's
Not
not
great long.
horrible for customers.
Right.
So I put together some quick numbers. I'll just run you through real quick. So for our cost-based hydro customers, our preference customers, we'd be looking at a 3.7% rate increase. And to give you some context, we're talking about a $2,000 impact on a $53,000 monthly bill. Our economic development customers, which are Western New York and Recharge New York, we're looking at a 4.4% increase, which is $450 on $10,000 per month. And our New York City governmental customers would absorb the entire 6% increase because most of the costs associated with serving that group are a pass-through of costs. And they have fuel prices because they're served from the Zeltman plant and the Astoria Energy 2 plant, as opposed to our hydro customers, which are served obviously from our hydro plants and no fuel costs there. And then lastly, on the transmission side, it's negligible. We're looking at a 3-cent increase to a $1.18 monthly bill. So I'd consider that to be, you know, fairly negligible there. I think that basically wraps everything up for you.
So a good way of
Quick and dirty.
understanding that our customers are continuing to feel pain. And very mindful. I appreciate that,
Yep.
understanding what's happening as
Yeah,
costs go up
And
and
we're always looking at mitigation efforts. So on our side, we're looking to cut costs wherever we can from a corporate standpoint. We have hedging in place, which helps with our customer bills. And there are also things like Adam mentioned a few minutes ago, the monetized funds, where as prices are going up, we're seeing increasing amounts that are getting rebated back to our economic development customers. So we are always looking for mitigation efforts there.
And I guess I'd suggest, and we can move on, we think about a way, so this is just an ongoing discussion, an ongoing, won't say analysis, but recap, so that we're continually focusing and on the aggregate impact of all that you've referenced. It's incumbent on us to bend the cost curve. You know, we can't just blindly assume back to the one-way street. We've been a victim of a one-way street. We don't want to, you know, be
increase costs
accused
for our
of delivering
customers.
that, you know, on the back of our customers. So we can't be presumptuous in an increasingly competitive marketplace. So
Yep, and we're working on
Let's-
ideas to create some buffers so that the customers can not have as significant
correct.
increases
And what we can
otherwise.
do for the benefit of our customer,
Yes.
how we can enable our customers, et cetera. So let's have an ongoing dialogue there. Start with the customer rather than with us. We
Yep.
work from the customer back rather than, well, here's what it is for us. Boom, good luck, customer. No, start with the customer and engage there. So
Yeah, I
let's
agree.
just I'd actually have an ongoing, literally, you know, dialogue about all this because there's no reason to believe it's going to get anything but worse.
yes.
The end, this
And
isn't
certainly in the near
pandemic driven. There's a lot of other
Sure.
impacts.
I'm happy to do so. And as you know, with our Ed Cap 1.0 and 2.0, that was something that we, kept front and center. So look forward to reporting on that relative to our customer contracts. in the future.
Great, thanks. There's no vote necessary. Sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sensitive to, I don't want to lose our quorum here. What votes are needed? Where do we need votes?
That's what I'm going to.
Okay, great.
Obviously, there are no votes on this. We actually will need a vote on the next 3 items, which Andrew is going to present to us.
Ready, just teed up.
Where is he? Oh,
He's on the
he's
screen
there. So Andrew, you've got the next 3 items. If we could condense your bullet point, we've really only got about, 5 or 10 minutes to be able to go through, because your 3 items do need motions by the committee and we don't want to lose our quorum. So can you do that in 5 to 8 minutes? Great.
Right. Good afternoon. I'm here today to present 3 items for operations. The first one is an on-call service contract for high voltage circuit breakers. Next slide, please. Today, we're requesting the Financial Risk Committee recommend approval of 2 10-year contract awards for Hitachi Energy of Raleigh, North Carolina, and Siemens Energy of Orlando, Florida, with a waiver of the Article 22 steel components from the contract agreement language in an aggregate amount of $50 million to the Board of Trustees. These contracts will allow flexibility to retain qualified vendors for design manufacturing of new circuit breakers, further advancing the state's goals and Vision 2030. Further, these contracts provide the authority the ability to contract inspection and repair refurbished services for the fleet of circuit breakers that we have throughout the state. A limited notice to proceed was issued to Hitachi Energy in the amount of $1.4 million in March 2022 to support the Smart Path Connect project. A request for proposal was issued in October 21, with 2 proposals received in November. Among other evaluation criteria, the bids were reviewed based on safety, cost, technical and commercial requirements, relevant experience, and compliance to NERC CIP 13. Following an extensive evaluation, the committee recommends on-call awards to both Hitachi and Siemens as qualified best value proposals in an aggregate amount of $50 million for a 10-year term. MWBE goals were waived on this event as it was determined to offer little to no prime or subcontracting opportunities as allowed for New York State Article 15A. Although the breakers for these contracts will be produced in Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania and Jackson, Mississippi, respectively, both vendors have requested waivers to Article 22 for steel components due to established sub-supplier bases for components which source materials globally. It should be noted that the steel components for this equipment is approximately 8 to 10% of the total value. Thank you. I'll now take any questions.
No, why don't you go ahead and do the next one, because there's also a steel waiver in the next item. So why don't you just go ahead and run through all of them, and then we'll do the questions at the end.
Sounds good. Thank you. So the second item is an on-call contract awards for substation transformers and reactors. Next slide, please. Today, we're requesting the Finance and Risk Committee recommend approval of 2 10-year contract awards to Hitachi Energy of Raleigh, North Carolina, and Royal Smith Transformers of Nijmegen, Netherlands, and a waiver of Article 22 steel components from the contract agreement language in an aggregate amount of $110 million to the Board of Trustees. Similar to the previous item, these on-calls allow for flexibility, the authority to retain qualified vendors for manufacturing of new transformers, reactors, and contract service and repairs. A limited notice to proceed was issued in the aggregate amount of $5.13 million in February 2022 to support the Smart Path Connect project. A request for qualifications was issued in June of 2021 with 9 respondents. In September, a request for proposal was issued to all 9 suppliers as they were deemed qualified. 6 proposals were received in October, and the evaluation criteria for this bid event were similar to the previous items. Following the extensive evaluation process, the committee recommends on-call contract awards to Hitachi Energy and Royal Smith Transformers in an aggregate amount of $110 million for a 10-year term, as they were deemed qualified and provide the best value. MWBE goals were waived on this bid event as it was determined to offer little to no prime or subcontracting opportunities as allowed per New York State Article 15A. Only one supplier has manufacturing capabilities in the US, but at this time has not been deemed qualified. The remaining suppliers have manufacturing capabilities overseas, with steel components only contributing to 12 to 15% of the total equipment value, along with a well-established sub-supplier base for components which source their materials globally. A waiver for Article 22 for steel components is requested. We may return at a later date to recommend additional vendors be awarded contracts as part of this bid event, pending their ability to meet the authority's bulk electric system requirements. Thank you.
Okay, and just a quick note, I've asked the team to go back. We've done a number of waivers, still waivers. And so I think it would be good for us to have a broader picture of what that means in terms of dollar amounts, the kinds of contracts we're giving and what that means for that we're not able to fill that capacity domestically. And so at some point, you're going to come back and give us a fuller view of what that entire financial picture looks like, right?
Will do.
So,
Yep.
yeah. All right, Andrew, if you'll go through the next one.
Can I just,
Sorry,
oh,
go ahead. You have a
no,
question?
fine.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to clarify the need for the interim awards ahead of our approvals. I don't recall seeing that happen historically. How much of that is a trend and what's a pattern one award was made a week ago. Educate me.
Sir, due to the fast-moving project, Smart Path Connect, it was necessary to not only retain these vendors, but also get them started on engineering and design work in order to meet our objectives on the Smart Path Connect project.
And is that decision usually made on timing as opposed to dollar amount? Like, I know that you're able to move forward if it's under a certain dollar amount, as opposed to because you need to.
Yeah, I think it's driven more by timing, and we've got these milestones embedded in these projects where they have in-service dates contemplated. So we frequently run up against timing issues. But I don't think it's not a dollar driven.
We do issue them a limited notice to proceed, a small dollar amount to get, like Andy said, engineering working, but they're only able to do a small portion of work until the board actually approves the contract.
So if you recall, you approved the full cost of the project a few months ago, but we held back the group from exposure to 20, then to 40, given we had not yet received the cost, the abandonment incentive from FERC, which means if the project was canceled, we'd recover all of our costs. We received that notification last week. So we're comfortable that we have that in place. So from a project perspective, they can go forward, pending your approvals. But we've been holding them back up to now until we got that FERC order.
I would encourage you to look at it, see if they're really time-based milestones, they're coming. And if we're out of sequence, either one, figure out how to get our approvals, ahead of the game, rather than get our perfunctory approval after the fact. So it's somewhere between awkward, clumsy, and bad practice, bad form. So I'd encourage you to look at your own process so that we're in front of it, not behind it.
Yeah, fair point.
Understood. Fair enough.
Andy, last item really quickly.
Sure. So the third item is a capital expenditure authorization for the St. Lawrence Power Project, Robert Moses Power Dam Auto Transformer 1 replacement. Today, we're requesting the Finance and Risk Committee recommend a capital expenditure authorization in the amount of approximately $13 million to replace Auto Transformer 1 at the St. Lawrence Robert Moses Power Dam to the Board of Trustees. This item is being brought to the committee as the issues with the auto transformer were discovered late in 2021 after the 2022 budget was finalized. The authority's 4-year capital plan will be updated to reflect the cost of this project. In September 2021, high dissolved gases were detected in oil samples, indicating arcing within the transformer. Additional tests and inspections revealed internal damage to the tertiary windings of the unit. This transformer has been in operation since the mid-1970s and is considered beyond useful life. Further, it appears that it has a common failure mode to Robert Moses Auto Transformer 2, which is currently out of service. The project includes upgrades to existing facilities for compliance to current codes and regulations. To expedite this project, the contract change order was issued to Smith Transformers with a limited notice to proceed pending capital funding approval in accordance with the expenditure authorization procedure. The existing contract scope includes a replacement for the identical transformer, Auto Transformer 2, of which the engineering is already complete. Design finalization and fabrication of the transformer will occur this year, with delivery and installation planned to be complete in 2022, subject to approved outages. Thank you. And I'll take any questions.
And I assume this was discovered through regular maintenance review. Is that how this was? Yeah, okay. All right, so we have two contracts.
I'll move all three
All right, with that motion,
with my editorial duly noted.
I'll second.
I've got a motion moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have a consent agenda before the committee. I'll ask for a motion to accept the consent agenda. Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries as well. The date of the next joint Finance and Risk Committee meeting is scheduled to be held on April 26th, 2022. I'll ask for a motion to close this meeting.
So moved.
So moved.
There's a second in there.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for rushing. Team, I appreciate the work that you've done. Everyone, thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Judge.
Yep.
Joe, thank you.